Any system, in order to exist, must not be internally contradictory. That's logical. Otherwise, it will fall apart. Our research should be based on this principle. Therefore, we need to analyze clusters of message descriptions from different sources and examine them for contradictions. This will lead us back to the truth, since we have no other sources of information. And we also have no way to test these phenomena through purely scientific methods or experimentation. For example, let's return to the question of suffering on earth and the apparent contradiction in religious declarations that God is love, ideas that also align with descriptions of the near-death experience phenomenon. People consistently describe this light and love and say that this light is God or a divine light. This immediately raises a question. If God is love, then what are suffering, torment, and pain? Why should they exist at all, and what is their root cause? To explore this topic, we'll need to touch on esoteric knowledge. What data do we have in this area? Since the topic of NDEs is closely connected to out-of-body experiences, let's start by looking at Robert Monroe. What did he uncover on this subject? He argues that Earth is a kind of school and that suffering functions as a tool for learning. But that immediately raises a logical question and some striking parallels. Take, for example, the torture carried out in Nazi camps on prisoners. Could that also be framed as a form of learning, with the fascists treating people as test subjects? You could imagine it this way. Someone is captured, tied to a chair, and subjected to electric shocks, constantly suffering as part of an experiment. We would be deliberately causing that suffering. Following Monroe's logic, would that make us God within that experience? And at the same time, the subject might undergo deep internal shifts, possibly even what some would call spiritual growth. It paints a rather unsettling picture. So where does love fit into this? What is actually going on here? Are you serious? In terms of the idea that Earth is a place of constant suffering, the same was already true a billion years ago, starting from single-celled organisms. The entire evolutionary record of life is one of perpetual consumption, everything devouring everything else. What kind of school could that be? There's an obvious logical contradiction here. Anyone who graduates from such a school, what kind of degree would they receive? A maniacal egoist or a saintly altruist? You can answer that yourself if you think critically. At the same time, one can always fall back on the claim that we are limited by our nature and incapable of understanding the full laws of multidimensional worlds and timelines, because, while embodied in a physical body, we do not possess access to the higher self.
Like where all my emotions are. I can feel it. It's very interested, especially my negative emotions, my guilt, my shame, and not just that, but the good emotions. And then it's super interested in that. And I don't know why, but man, it feels like I can feel it. It's almost like it's swimming through these emotions, man. It's so interested. And then all of a sudden, everything just goes really quiet in that tunnel. And I can feel something building up. And I can feel it, and it's coming towards me, man. And all of a sudden, it bursts out of this tunnel. And immediately, I am encircled in just a bubble of positive emotion. Just every positive, every good emotion that you could imagine, amplified by 1,000. I'm just, oh man, I get like I to this day, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking of that feeling. And what's coming out of the tunnel is, I can't see it, but it's like it feels like just like an avalanche of water just flowing over me, and I'm encased in this bubble of just goodness. And it looks like transparent, clear electricity. And it's just flowing out. And then the room became, everything became very still. And the room kind of darkened. And my daughter was no longer standing there. And my wife was no longer standing beside me. In my perception, I was still sitting on the bed. I was still in the bedroom. But, you know, there's something in the room with me. And it kind of scared me, because I kind of looked to my left and I got a glimpse of something spinning, and I really started getting scared. And the spinning continued, and as I looked over to my left, it was like almost like a door sliding open, except it was curved, like a corner shower door, you know, those plastic ones that are curved and they open. And it opened, and there was like this white static, calming, soothing light coming out. But I was just hit with this wall of intelligence, man. Just it gobsmacked me, man. It was just, the intelligence was just washing over me. And I was trying to figure out like how intelligent, like I've never encountered anything like that. And the intelligence was, I think it was like, I was trying to put a number on it. Like, is the IQ like 500, 1,000, 10,000? I think it was unlimited. That one after, and I thought about it, but at the time I was like, holy smokes, what the hell is this?
Yes, all of that may sound coherent, but then why do torture, war, injustice, violence, and even thoughts about them generate a constant inner resistance in us, a feeling that something in this system is fundamentally wrong and shouldn't be this way at all? It feels as though predation and mutual exploitation, essentially a form of slavery, contradict our very nature. And yet, many people who have experienced NDEs strangely seem to accept this contradiction when certain entities or forces convey to them that there is no such thing as good and evil.
I was adopted when I was 14 months old, and I was adopted into a very dysfunctional home. My adoptive grandfather was a diagnosed sexual psychopath pedophile, and my adoptive father and his twin brother, they ran a child trafficking ring. And so I was trafficked from age 2 into my 20s. So I went through a lot of extreme, horrific situations and lived in that criminal underworld and saw a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't believe. And it left me with very extreme after effects that I've been working through for many, many years. And well, the NDEs happened before age 10. And one of them was through near drowning. And one of them was from a drug overreaction. And it was at the hands of the abuser. And at that point is when I felt a tug. It was like I was being pulled. And I didn't have a body anymore, but it kind of felt like the chest area. And it was this real pull. And things started to move very fast. And I was pulled along and still curious, right? And then the light came and I was pulled toward this light. There was a being there, 2 beings of light, and they didn't have form like a person. They were, it was hard to describe with words. They were just vibration and energy and colors that kept undulating. But the main thing was that it was pure unconditional love that they were made of and that was receiving my essence. And so these 2 beings of light were they were just helping me to remember what I had signed up for. And the biggest takeaway that stuck with me was the unconditional love and the no judgment.
Put simply, it ends up looking like this. A God who is said to be love created something like a prison or a torture chamber in order to torment the very conscious beings he created. For what purpose? As we're told, spiritual growth, and everyone seems to agree with that. Wonderful. But in reality, out of this pile of contradictions and omissions, a far less comforting picture begins to emerge. Apparently, one of the most dominant surface-level explanations would be a single underlying cause based on the principle, as above, so below. If we draw parallels with our own civilization, where we spend a huge amount of effort on one primary activity, namely obtaining energy, in our case, electricity and food, then things start to look different. If we factor this in, many aspects of the logic behind religious and political processes on our planet begin to make sense. They appear more like instruments of control and management. In simple terms, we might be seen as servants of God, voluntarily subjecting ourselves to suffering in order to sustain this higher being. Is that really the case, or could I be mistaken?
Or maybe you're not right. It's possible that people who have near-death experiences aren't encountering God at all, but rather dark forces, fallen angels, demons, the devil, or whatever else you might call them.
That's right. The only way in this case to resolve the internal contradictions of this system, where on one hand we have love and on the other suffering, is to introduce some other force into the system, one that opposes God, a new player on the stage. That leaves the question, where does all this energy of pain and suffering actually go? Who absorbs it? Who is the beneficiary? Is it God, who is said to be love, or some other forces? Let's return to Robert Monroe. What did he write in his books about these opposing forces, about so-called archons?
Archons, in some Gnostic and esoteric traditions, are entities described as rulers or administrators of the material world. They are sometimes identified with archangels or higher forces that govern physical reality. In these systems, they are believed to have been created by a demiurge, such as a figure like Yaldabaoth, who is associated with the formation of the material plane of existence. According to these views, each inhabited planet may be overseen by a particular group of archons, whose role is to manage the development of civilizations. They are said to influence the course of history, ideologies, and social structures, as well as the behavior of intelligent beings. In some interpretations, archons are believed to have an interest in a specific kind of energy generated by strong emotions and experiences of living beings. In modern esoteric and conspiratorial theories, archons are often attributed more concrete forms of control. They are thought to influence governments, science, and religion through intermediaries or secret structures. Some of these theories claim that they create perceptual illusions or limitations of consciousness that prevent people from perceiving deeper levels of reality. There are also claims involving technological control. Certain concepts describe the origin of archons as artificial, allegedly created from energy or through the use of consciousness, including human consciousness. These ideas do not belong to classical Gnosticism, but are later additions and reinterpretations of ancient teachings. Archons are sometimes contrasted with demons from the Goetia, with the latter considered subordinate to them. However, such a hierarchy exists only within specific esoteric systems and is not universal. An interesting episode sometimes associated with the idea of archons is described by Robert Monroe in his book Far Journeys. In one of his experiences, he observes an unusual phenomenon. Within a non-physical realm, a signal is heard, after which all beings stop their activity, and a higher entity appears before whom the others line up. Monroe himself does not identify this being as an archon. This interpretation emerged later among readers. In a number of esoteric traditions, it is also claimed that archons use the Enochian language, a mystical language believed to possess special properties and connections to angelic or higher beings. In classical Gnosticism, archons are described more as cosmological forces or principles, while many of the modern details, such as technological control or specific scenarios of governing humanity, are later interpretations.
I'd like to add another highly detailed esoteric teaching to this, The Rose of the World by Daniil Andreev, in which he describes in depth a multiplicity of worlds and the structure of the universe, somewhat similar to Robert Monroe. But that's a separate topic since the concept is quite complex. For now, we're only interested in the parallels. For example, in both authors' frameworks, humanity appears as a kind of source of nutritional energy. Monroe calls this substance lush, while in Andreev's system it has two forms: gavaha, a burning energy released at the moment of bloodshed, and shava, a psycho-emotional radiation. In both cases, these energies are described as nourishment not for divine forces but for demonic entities. If we assume that the energy of pain and suffering is not consumed by a being that exists through love, but rather by opposing forces that feed on pain and suffering, then we can logically resolve this contradiction within the worldview being constructed. In that case, the wardens of this prison would not be divine forces at all, but tormentors, archons, or demons. However, this is a subject for a separate and much more detailed investigation.
Basically, I've always remembered what I thought when I was born. And and all of this was instantaneous. It was an awareness that was just there when I was born. And I wasn't happy, to be here again. I knew that I had to be. I knew that I had absolute knowledge on the other side. And I knew that I couldn't have absolute knowledge while I was here. And that really aggravated me. So I knew that I did not want to come here, but I knew that I had to, that I was told to. And so for those of us who remember how wonderful it is and the joy and the love, and I'll use the word bliss, how blissful it is. Yes, we're not questioning whether we have a choice or not. We're just so happy to be doing whatever it is we are to do. It all feels wonderful. It's not a chore. It's not like, oh, I have to do this paperwork. I would say that sounds like it's coming from the human perspective. They shouldn't have sent us here because it's so unpleasant and they didn't know. I just feel that's from the human perspective. If I'm correct, that one purpose of being here, of the greater drama, is to move humanity forward, it's not up to me to question that, because we're all playing roles, and yet we're not. I don't feel that we are puppets, that we're being manipulated. We're marionettes being manipulated.
It turns out that we can't always trust the accounts of people who have experienced NDEs.
Again, we are looking for a pattern, a kind of template through which we can examine all these cases. What's interesting is that after the light transition, the descriptions begin to diverge sharply. If such a deviation exists in the system and the level of noise in the data increases, that suggests that some kind of interference may be occurring at that point. As a result, memories and descriptions could be altered or replaced with almost anything. It's possible that the goal of this would be to prevent the person from questioning anything internally, to ensure that whatever narrative is presented to them feels satisfying enough that they simply accept it. This could take the form of visions of Jesus, the Virgin Mary, Muhammad, Buddha, aliens, relatives, literally anyone. They might even all appear at once. The key point would be that the person's consciousness feels satisfied and doesn't ask further questions, instead blindly believing in this nonsense.
It's strange. I was immediately reminded of the books Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée and Masquerade of Angels by Carla Turner. It's similar to the UFO phenomenon. The descriptions also reach the point of absurdity.
Do we have any cases of people who have experienced NDEs so that our conclusions don't come across as unfounded to the audience?
Yes, of course.